following story was researched and compiled by a dark web group investigating declassified government documents and unexplained phenomena. What you're about to hear next is the true story of Project WINGSPAN and the disappearance of Dr. Stacy Chadwick. In the maze-like depths of the National Archives in Washington, D.C., mysteries don't just hide in shadows, they hide in plain sight, filed away in endless rows of identical boxes. But sometimes, the most incredible discoveries happen by accident. The morning of January 15, 2023 began like any other for Dr. Stacy Chadwick. The senior archivist moved through the climate-controlled storage rooms with practiced efficiency, processing another batch of declassified Cold War-era documents. The box looked unremarkable. Standard government-issue cardboard, yellowed with age, labeled with an alphanumeric code that meant nothing to anyone except database computers. Dr. Chadwick had spent 15 years working with classified military documentation, but nothing in her experience could have prepared her for what she found in that box. The folder was labeled Project WINGSPAN, Behavioral Studies, Point Pleasant Branch. Inside were hundreds of pages of classified documents, each stamped with fading, top-secret watermarks, lab reports, security logs, personnel files. But it was the photographs that made her hands shake, grainy black and white images of something that shouldn't exist. Growing up in West Virginia, Dr. Chadwick had heard all the stories about the Mothman sightings. Everyone dismissed them as folklore, mass hysteria, but these papers told a very different story. 3 weeks after her initial discovery, Dr. Chadwick vanished. Her apartment was found empty, her computer wiped clean, but she had anticipated this possibility. Luckily, we are able to share this transcript with our viewers. The following is her account, dated January 18, 2023, 2 days before her disappearance.
I'm recording this now because I don't know how much longer I'll be able to. They're watching me. Not just the creature, but people. Government people. I've noticed black SUVs outside my apartment, and my phone makes strange clicking sounds during calls. I mean, just yesterday, my office was randomly searched by a security person that I have never seen before. But they need to know that they haven't gotten everything. They want to know if I still have stuff. What happened that morning has to be documented, even if this recording never sees the light of day, even if I disappear like Dr. Martinez did. I was alone in the archive room when I found the first batch of photographs. The way they were filed, it wasn't random. Somebody wanted them found, wanted the truth to come out. In 15 years of archival work, I've never seen classified documents misfiled this deliberately. Naturally, I looked through every one of them, and what I saw was horrifying. The creature in the images defied anything that I knew about biology, physics, evolution. They called it a biological surveillance platform in the reports, but that's just typical government whitewashing. What they created, what they let loose into the world, it was something far beyond their control. Its wingspan filled the entire testing chamber. There's the eyes that hit me first. They were perfectly circular, glowing red in the flash photography. In looking at those photos, I knew instantly why so many witnesses had mental breakdowns after their encounters. Some kinds of knowledge, it can break something in your mind. And I was feeling it, and I was just looking at the images. 2 days later, men in suits came to the archives. They asked me about routine security protocols, but their questions were all about access to records, specifically from 66 and 67. They took files, but I had already hidden the key documents. And they were watching me closely, waiting for me to lead them to the rest of the evidence. But they don't understand. This is bigger than their cover-ups, bigger than their secrets. and I needed to do something about it. The creature isn't just some escaped experiment. It's still out there. It's probably not alone. The files suggest that there were other facilities, other projects. Wingspan was just the first successful attempt. How many more are there? How many other doors did they open? I know how this sounds, but I swear on everything I believe in that what I saw was real. The files are real, buried in identical boxes in archives across the country. I know it. Just be careful who you trust. They're always watching.
The documents revealed a project that began with rigid scientific protocols, but evolved into something the researchers struggled to explain. Project WINGSPAN started in November 1966 as an environmental monitoring operation. Dr. Martinez and Dr. Webb meticulously documented atmospheric anomalies, seismic patterns, and electromagnetic fluctuations around Point Pleasant. By December, their data showed concerning correlations. The team detected unusual energy signatures near the Silver Bridge's support structures. Dr. Martinez's reports grew increasingly urgent, filled with technical data about metal fatigue and resonance patterns that didn't match any known phenomena. The team's scientific detachment began cracking under the weight of their findings. Power consumption logs showed them working through nights, running test after test, trying to understand what their instruments were telling them. Dr. Martinez would stare at those readouts for hours, muttering about prevention and public safety. The timing tells its own story. 2 weeks before the Silver Bridge collapse, the facility's instruments recorded unprecedented spikes in electromagnetic activity. Phone records showed dozens of calls to Washington, desperate attempts to raise alarms about structural integrity. The official narrative remains unchanged. Project WINGSPAN was a standard Cold War monitoring program, terminated due to budget constraints. The Silver Bridge collapse was ruled a simple structural failure, but Dr. Chadwick's investigation uncovered something more human. A team of scientists who realized too late that they were measuring warning signs of an impending disaster. Their instruments had detected the bridge's growing instability, but they couldn't break through the walls of secrecy their own project had built, trying to prove what their instruments were telling them before it was too late. They had the data. They saw the pattern. They just couldn't get anyone to listen. Next up is an eyewitness account from a man who has kept what he knows locked away for over 50 years. He meticulously documented everything he experienced and has agreed to share his account by reading his papers back to us.
My name is Charles Coleman. I worked as a night shift security guard at the Point Pleasant Research Facility from 1966 to 1967. I've kept quiet about what I saw for over 50 years. But after reading Dr. Chadwick's testimony, well, someone needs to connect these dots. I was there the night everything changed. December 12, 1967, 3 days before the bridge collapsed. The scientists had been acting strange for weeks, staying late, having heated arguments in the hallways, making those urgent phone calls Dr. Chadwick mentioned. But that night was different. I was doing my regular rounds when I heard the equipment in the main lab going crazy. All those machines they'd brought in were lighting up like Christmas trees. Dr. Martinez was there, which wasn't unusual. He practically lived in the lab by then. But the look on his face, I'll never forget it, pure terror. He was standing at the window, staring out into the darkness. When I followed his gaze, I saw it. Everyone talks about the eyes, and they're right, those glowing red circles that seem to bore right through you. But what they don't mention is the silence. Complete and absolute silence. The creature was perched on a power line about 200 yards from the facility. Its wingspan, Dr. Chadwick's files say 17 feet, but I swear it looked bigger that night. The way it moved wasn't natural, like watching stop-motion photography in real life, jerky, mechanical almost. But here's the part I've never told anyone. It wasn't watching us. It was watching the bridge. Its head was turned toward those steel spans, completely fixed, like it was studying them. Dr. Martinez saw it too. He started frantically writing calculations on the whiteboard, muttering about resonance patterns and structural harmonics. I heard him make one last phone call that night. His exact words were, "The readings match. It's not causing the weakness. It's warning us about it. We have to evacuate that bridge now." But whoever was on the other end obviously didn't listen. 3 days later, the bridge collapsed. 46 people died. And you know what? The power consumption logs Dr. Chadwick found? They show a massive surge right before the collapse. Every piece of monitoring equipment in that lab went off the charts. Dr. Martinez was right. They weren't studying some government experiment gone wrong. They were documenting something that was trying to warn us. The next day, men in black suits came and stripped the facility bare. They took everything, the equipment, the logs, even the personal notes from Dr. Martinez's desk. They told us we'd never worked there, that the facility had been decommissioned months ago. Standard NDAs turned into threats. People who asked too many questions started disappearing. But they missed something. The night before they came, I saw Dr. Martinez hiding files in the archive room. He looked right at me and said, "Someone will find these when they need to." Now I know he was talking about Dr. Chadwick. I recognized some of the photos in her files. They're from that night. The ones they said never existed. The ones that prove what we saw was real. That prove we could have saved those people if someone had just listened. Do I think the government created the Mothman? No. I think they discovered something they couldn't control or understand, something that was trying to communicate, and rather than admit their own helplessness, they buried the truth under layers of classification and denial. Dr. Chadwick was right about one more thing. It's still out there. Last month, I saw those red eyes again, reflected in my rearview mirror on Route 2. And you know what? I wasn't afraid, because now I understand what it's been trying to tell us all along. Just remember, not all monsters are what they seem. Sometimes the real horror isn't in what we see, but in what we choose to ignore. Dr. Chadwick knew that. I think that's why they took her.
3 days after our interview with Charles Coleman, he received an official letter reminding him of the non-disclosure agreement he signed in 1967. His home had been searched while he was out, nothing taken, but his files clearly reorganized. He stopped answering our calls. The truth about Project WINGSPAN lies not in dramatic cover-ups, but in the mundane efficiency of bureaucracy. Documents weren't destroyed. They were reclassified. Witnesses weren't threatened. They were discredited. The government didn't need elaborate conspiracies when they had something far more effective: paperwork. Dr. Martinez's structural analysis of the Silver Bridge still exists, buried in sub-basement storage under routine maintenance. His warnings were specific, technical, and tragically accurate. The equipment that generated his data shouldn't have existed for decades. Yet the power consumption records don't lie. Something in that facility was far beyond 1960s technology. Dr. Chadwick didn't vanish dramatically. She took an unexpected sabbatical, according to her employer. Her bills are still being paid. Everything looks perfectly ordinary, just like Dr. Martinez's early retirement in 1968, just like the equipment upgrade that stripped the Point Pleasant facility bare. Her last email to her sister reads, "The most effective way to hide something isn't to lock it away. It's to make everyone believe there's nothing to find." The truth is still there, buried in mundane files across America's vast archive system, not hidden behind locks and guards, but concealed under the sheer weight of information itself. The question isn't whether there are more secrets to find, It's whether we'll recognize them when we see them.